He built me a palace of lies. For 10 years I lived the perfect life in a beautiful Boston home with a man who seemed to worship me. He was charismatic, successful, and the envy of all our friends. But behind the charming smile and lavish gifts, a darkness was growing. I dismissed my doubts as paranoia, his lies as misunderstandings, until I discovered what he was really doing in his home office late at night. This isn't just a story about betrayal or a cheating husband. It's a deep dive into a web of deceit so intricate it nearly destroyed me. It's a story about a sophisticated financial crime investigation that I, his unsuspecting wife, was forced to conduct in secret. What do you do when you discover the man you love is a monster hiding in plain sight, funding your life with devastating secrets? You'll have to listen to the very end to believe how it all unraveled, and how I finally took back my life. This is one revenge story you don't want to miss. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! It all started with the smell of lemon polish. An insignificant detail, I know, but that's where the first hairline crack appeared in the perfect marble facade of my life. For 10 years, my husband, Leo, had cultivated our world with the precision of a master gardener. We lived in a meticulously restored brownstone in Wellesley, a quiet, moneyed suburb just outside of Boston. Our lives were a curated collection of beautiful things: European vacations, benefit galas, and dinner parties, where the wine flowed as freely as the compliments aimed at my charming, successful husband. Leo was in finance, or something adjacent to it. He ran a boutique investment firm, a vague and impressive-sounding venture that afforded us our lifestyle. He was handsome, disarmingly charismatic, and possessed a unique talent for making everyone he spoke to feel like the most important person in the world. Especially me. He'd called me his anchor, the beautiful, steady center of his chaotic, brilliant world. I believed him. I managed our home, planned our social calendar, and chaired the fundraising committee for our shared passion project, the North Star Fund, a charity we co-founded to provide cutting-edge medical equipment for children's hospitals. It was my purpose, my joy, and I thought, our shared legacy. The lemon polish was my tell. Our housekeeper, Maria, came on Tuesdays and Fridays. She used a specific oil-based lemon polish on the antique mahogany desk in Leo's office. The scent was potent. It clung to the air for at least a full day. But that Sunday night, as I walked past his office, the smell was overwhelming, as if the desk had been polished just an hour before. Maria hadn't been there since Friday. I stopped in the doorway. Leo was on a business trip in Zurich, not due back until Wednesday. His office was his sanctuary, a place I rarely entered. He was particular about it. "It's a creative chaos, my love," he'd say with a wink. Best not to disturb the genius at work. Now, the room was pristine, not a paper out of place. The mahogany desk gleamed under the soft lamplight. It was too perfect, too clean. My heart began a low, nervous thrum. This was silly. It was just a smell, but it was a detail that was wrong. Compelled by an instinct I couldn't name, I stepped inside. The air was cool, still. I ran my hand over the back of his leather chair, the one he'd spent a fortune on. My eyes scanned the desk. His laptop was gone, of course, but everything else was in its place. The silver pen holder, the stack of financial journals, the framed photo of us in Santorini, my face bright with a naive, uncomplicated happiness. Then I saw it. Tucked just under the lip of the desk blotter was a corner of white paper, barely visible. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. It was a receipt from a local office supply store dated that morning, Sunday. A single item was listed: one data wipe high-strength USB drive, the kind used to permanently erase hard drives, leaving no trace. A cold dread washed over me. Who had been in his office? Who was wiping computers on a Sunday while my husband was supposedly across the Atlantic? When Leo called that night, his voice was warm and rich, a familiar comfort. "I'm missing me, my love?" he asked. "I miss you like crazy," I said, my voice tight. I had to force the words out. "How's Zurich?" "All work, no play, you know how it is. Just finalizing the details on the new European fund. It's going to be a game changer for us, Clara. For North Star." He always did that. Whenever I felt a flicker of doubt, he'd bring up the charity, our shared moral high ground. It was the ultimate shield. How could a man who worked so hard to help sick children be anything but good? Leo, I started, my heart pounding. It's strange. Maria must have come by today. The house smells like lemon polish. There was a beat of silence on the line. It was so brief I might have imagined it. Oh, that's odd. Maybe she got her days mixed up. Don't worry about it, honey. You worry too much. His tone was light, dismissive. It was the voice he used whenever I questioned anything, from a strange credit card charge to a late night he couldn't quite explain. A near being a silly, emotional woman voice. It was masterful gaslighting, and for a decade it had worked flawlessly. You're probably right, I said, the familiar shame washing over me. I was being paranoid, overreacting. But after we hung up, I couldn't shake the image of that receipt. The data wipe USB. For the next 2 days, I lived in a state of cognitive dissonance. There was Leo, my loving, generous husband. And then there was this other shadowy figure who had someone secretly wiping computers in our home. The two couldn't coexist. My mind refused to merge them. So I did what I'd always done. I trusted Leo. He came home on Wednesday, sweeping into the house with 2 enormous shopping bags from a designer I loved, and a story about a stuffy meeting that ran late. He kissed me deeply, told me I was beautiful, and the creeping dread receded. He was here. Everything was fine. The receipt was a meaningless anomaly. That weekend, we hosted a fundraising dinner for North Star. Our home was filled with Boston's philanthropic elite. Leo was in his element, moving through the crowd with an easy grace, a glass of champagne in one hand, his other arm draped possessively around my waist. He gave a speech that night that brought tears to my eyes. He spoke of hope, of community, of our sacred duty to the most vulnerable. He held my hand, looked directly at me and said, "None of this would be possible without my incredible wife, Clara, my anchor, my conscience." The room erupted in applause. I felt a swell of pride and love that was so powerful it physically hurt. I looked at this brilliant, good man and felt sick with guilt for ever doubting him. The next week I was working on the North Star quarterly report. As co-chair I had access to our financials. It was usually a straightforward task. Our donations came in, our expenses went out to purchase equipment, and I tracked it all in a shared spreadsheet. As I was cross-referencing our bank statements with our donation log, I noticed something odd. A wire transfer. A very large one, for $250,000, had been sent from the North Star account to an entity I didn't recognize. Aperture Holdings, LLC. I frowned, searching our records. There was no invoice from Aperture, no contract, no email correspondence. We had purchased an MRI machine for Boston Children's Hospital that month, but that was through Siemens, and the payment had already cleared. This was a completely separate, undocumented transaction. My first thought was that it was a mistake, a clerical error. I decided to check past statements. I went back 3 months. There it was again. A wire to Aperture Holdings for $150,000. Another one for $200,000. My blood ran cold. I spent the next 4 hours digging through every bank statement since we'd founded the charity 3 years ago. It was a pattern. Every quarter, like clockwork, a huge sum of money was wired from our charity to this same shell company. It totaled over $2 million. $2 million that had vanished from a fund for sick children. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. This couldn't be real. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked back to Leo's office. This time I didn't hesitate. I sat in his expensive leather chair, the one that now felt like a throne of lies, and I opened his desk drawer. It was filled with the usual office supplies, pens, paper clips, a stapler. But underneath a stack of blank letterhead, my fingers brushed against a small black moleskine notebook. I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones, that I shouldn't open it. This was the point of no return. This was the moment where I chose to shatter the beautiful snow globe of my life. I opened it. Leah's elegant, confident handwriting filled the pages. It wasn't a journal, it was a ledger. On the left side of each page was a date and a dollar amount, corresponding exactly to the wire transfers from the North Star account. On the right side was a series of codes and allocations. PMT1, Lake House. PMT2, Cayman ACT. PMT3, Personal Portfolio. Aperture Holdings. He wasn't just transferring the money, he was laundering it. taking donations meant for MRI machines and chemotherapy chairs and using them to pay for our life. The down payment on our vacation home in the Berkshires, the investments that padded his genius portfolio, the offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the desk to keep from falling. My mind flashed back to his speech, my conscience. He hadn't been praising me, he had been mocking me. I was the perfect cover. The earnest, trustworthy wife who chaired the charity, lending her genuine sincerity to his monstrous deception. My purpose, my entire identity for the past 3 years, was a lie. I was a prop in his long con. The gaslighting, the dismissiveness, the constant little manipulations, it wasn't just a character flaw. It was the strategy, a way to keep me docile and incurious while he bled our charity dry. The man I loved didn't exist. He was a carefully constructed character, and I had been his most devoted audience. The final entry in the ledger was from the previous Sunday, the day he was in Zurich. Final sweep. Transfer balance from A to Cayman. Wipe local drives. Project complete. Hadn't been in Zurich. He hadn't been in Zurich. In this house, wiping the computers, erasing the evidence, preparing to disappear with millions of dollars of stolen money, and the data wipe USB. He hadn't even bothered to get rid of the receipt. That's how little he thought of me. He didn't believe I was smart enough or brave enough to ever look. I closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer. The shock was beginning to recede, replaced by something else. A feeling so cold and hard it felt like a shard of ice was forming in my chest. It was rage. Pure, undiluted rage. He had underestimated me. He thought I was just his anchor, a decorative weight to hold him steady. He was about to find out that an anchor can also be used to drag a ship down to the bottom of the sea. My financial crime investigation had just begun, and I would be the one to complete it. The rage was a fire, but I knew I had to bank it, let it smolder deep inside where he couldn't see the smoke. For the next 2 weeks I played the part of Clara, the loving, unsuspecting wife, with an Oscar-worthy performance. I greeted him with a kiss when he came home. I listened patiently to his fabricated stories about market volatility and demanding clients. I smiled through dinner parties, my hand resting on his arm, a perfect portrait of domestic bliss. But behind my eyes I was a different person. I was a hunter. My first move was to secure the evidence. The little black ledger was my Rosetta Stone. I waited until he was in the shower one morning, then slipped into his office. With trembling hands I used my phone to photograph every single page, uploading the images to a new, encrypted cloud account I'd created under a fake name. Then I bought an identical Moleskine notebook and spent 2 painstaking hours forging his handwriting, creating a decoy ledger with fake entries about boring, legitimate business expenses. I swapped the real one for the fake and hid the original in a place he would never think to look, tucked inside the lining of a box of old maternity clothes in the attic, a painful reminder of a pregnancy we'd lost years ago. A corner of our life too sad for even his narcissism to touch. Next, I turned my attention to Aperture Holdings. I became a creature of the night. After Leo fell asleep, a deep, untroubled sleep I now found repulsive, I would slip out of bed and head to my small home office. Armed with a burner laptop I'd bought with cash, I plunged into the murky world of corporate registration and digital paper trails. It was easier than I thought. Leo's arrogance was his Achilles heel. He assumed no one was looking, so his tracks, while hidden, weren't invisible. Aperture Holdings, LLC was registered in Delaware, a state famous for its corporate secrecy, but the registration documents still required a signatory. The name listed was a Julian Croft. A quick search revealed Julian Croft didn't exist, it was an alias. But who was the registered agent? A generic corporate services company. I hit a wall. For days I searched for any link, any connection between Leo and Julian Croft. Nothing. I was about to give up one night, my eyes burning from staring at the screen, when I remembered a conversation from years ago. Leo had been bragging about his first business venture in college, a failed t-shirt company. The name was terrible, he'd laughed. Croft and Finch. My partner's last name and my mother's maiden name, so pretentious. Unshirimuios. Unasoundline T, and a maid, and connection. Croft. I did a new search, this time for Leo's old college roommate, the business partner he'd mentioned. His name was Thomas Croft. A quick social media search revealed a man living a quiet life as a high school history teacher in Ohio. A man who looked nothing like a partner in a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. He was the perfect patsy. Leo had likely forged his signature or paid him a small fee to use his name, counting on the fact that no one would ever connect a suburban teacher to a Delaware shell corporation. The pieces were clicking into place. I started a new spreadsheet, my own secret ledger. I mapped out every wire transfer from North Star to Aperture. Then, using old bank statements I found in our filing cabinet, I started tracing the money out of Aperture. The down payment on the lake house, the wire to the Porsche dealership, monthly payments to a high-end condo in Back Bay that wasn't in our name. A quick, sickening search of the address confirmed my suspicions. It was his mistress's apartment. The discovery barely registered. The affair was just a footnote in the grand symphony of his betrayal. The most damning trail led to a brokerage account with a firm based in the Cayman Islands. It was the financial black hole where most of the money had gone. I couldn't access the account itself, but I could trace the transfers to it. I meticulously documented every single transaction, creating a flowchart of his theft, complete with dates, amounts, and account numbers. My spreadsheet was becoming a work of art, a masterpiece of evidence. Living with him was a constant, nerve-wracking performance. He started to sense a shift in me, a subtle coolness I couldn't completely hide. You seem distant, Clara," he said one evening, cornering me in the kitchen. He put his hands on my shoulders, his gaze intense. "Is everything okay? You can tell me anything. We're a team." His touch made my skin crawl. I had to fight the urge to recoil. This was the most dangerous part of the game. I had to maintain the illusion, or he'd get spooked and accelerate his exit plan. I forced a weary smile. "I'm sorry, honey. It's just, the North Star Gala is coming up, and I'm stressed. I want it to be perfect." It was the perfect lie, weaponizing my devotion to the very charity he was robbing blind. His expression softened instantly. He pulled me into a hug, stroking my hair. "And, of course, that's it. Don't you worry. I'll handle everything. You just focus on looking beautiful." The condescension in his voice, the casual pat on the head, used to make me feel cherished. Now it fueled my resolve. The close call came a week before the gala. I was in my office, frantically cross-referencing a wire transfer, when I heard his footsteps on the stairs. He was home early. I slammed the burner laptop shut and shoved it under a pile of gala seating charts just as he walked in. "Working hard?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs. "Just finalizing the table arrangements. It's a nightmare." His eyes scanned the room, and for a terrifying second, they lingered on the seating charts where the laptop was hidden. I held my breath. He could expose me with one move, but then he smiled, that easy, confident smile. "Leave it for tonight. I'm taking you out. We deserve a break." I had never known fear like that. After he left the room, I sank into my chair, my body trembling. He was getting suspicious. I was running out of time. The North Star Fund annual gala was the pinnacle of Boston's social season. It was also the night I had chosen to bring Leo's world crashing down. For 2 weeks, I had been in quiet contact with a man named David Chen. He wasn't a cop or a lawyer. He was a senior enforcement agent with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. I'd found his name on an article about a high-profile fraud case he'd cracked a year prior. I reached out to him through a secure, anonymous email address, feeding him tidbits of my investigation, proving I was a credible source. At first, he was cautious, but as I provided more and more concrete evidence, account numbers, transaction dates, the name Aperture Holdings, he became very, very interested. We had a plan, and tonight was the night to set it in motion. I wore a shimmering silver gown. When Leo saw me, he actually gasped. "My God, Clara, you're breathtaking." He took my hand and kissed it. "Tonight is our masterpiece." "Yes," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "It is." I played my part, smiling, shaking hands, accepting compliments on the beautiful decor. I felt strangely calm, detached, as if I were watching a movie of my own life. The keynote speech was Leo's. He stepped up to the podium to a wave of thunderous applause. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight found him. He looked like a king surveying his court. "And friends, colleagues, believers," he began, his voice resonating through the hall. "We gather tonight not just to celebrate, but to recommit. To recommit to the simple, powerful idea that we have a duty to protect our most vulnerable children." As he spoke, I slipped my phone from my clutch. I sent a single pre-written text to Agent Chen. He's on stage now. A moment later, I received a reply. We're in position. Go. I took a deep breath and stood up from my table. I walked calmly, deliberately, towards the side of the stage. A few people turned to look at me, their expressions curious. Leo, lost in the rhythm of his own self-aggrandizing speech, didn't notice. Because the North Star Fund is more than a charity, he continued, his voice swelling with false emotion. It is a promise that no child will suffer because of a lack of resources. A promise I made with my incredible wife, Clara. He finally saw me then, standing just off stage. He faltered for a second, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He must have thought I was coming to stand beside him, the ever-supportive wife. He smiled, a magnanimous gesture, beckoning me forward. I walked to the second podium, the one meant for me to give my closing remarks later. I tapped the microphone. It squealed with feedback, a piercing shriek that cut through Leah's speech and silenced the room. Every eye was on me. Leo stared, his smile frozen on his face. I'm sorry to interrupt, I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the cavernous ballroom. My husband is right. The North Star Fund is about a promise, but it seems some promises are easier to break than others. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Leah's face had gone pale. Clara, what are you doing? He hissed into his mic, trying to keep his composure. I ignored him, my eyes scanning the room of wealthy donors. For the past 3 years I believed we were building a legacy of hope. But I recently discovered that this legacy was funded by a lie. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. And I have here, I said, holding up a sleek black flash drive. Not the data wipe, but my own evidence drive. A complete record of a systematic fraud perpetrated by my husband, Leo Finch. The gasp from the crowd was a collective rush of wind. Leo looked like he'd been struck by lightning. This is absurd, my wife. She's not well, she's been under a lot of stress. Have I? I asked, turning to him. Or have I just been doing some accounting? I have documented over $2 million in charitable donations. Our donations. Laundered through a shell corporation called Aperture Holdings, a company registered to a non-existent man named Julian Croft, and funneled into my husband's personal offshore accounts and used to fund our lifestyle, including, I recently discovered, the rent on a very lovely condo in Back Bay for his mistress. The room was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Then, from the back of the ballroom, the main doors opened. Agent Chen and 2 other stern-looking individuals in dark suits walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed Boston police officers. They moved with a quiet, unassailable authority. Leah's mask finally shattered. Raw panic contorted his handsome features. He looked from me to the agents, and in that moment he knew it was over. The charm, the lies, the entire elaborate fiction, it all evaporated under the harsh ballroom lights. As Agent Chen and his team walked towards the stage, I looked at my husband, the stranger I'd lived with for a decade. There was no triumph in my heart, no glee, just a vast, quiet emptiness, and the first glimmers of a hard-won peace. He didn't look at me as they escorted him off the stage, past the rows of stunned, horrified faces. His reign was over. His perfect world, built on my trust and stolen hope, had been brought down by the one person he never saw coming. His anchor. I stood at the podium for a long moment, alone in the spotlight. I looked out at the sea of faces, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like myself. Not Leah's wife, not his anchor, not his conscience. Just Clara. And I was finally free. The investigation was over, mine and theirs. And my life was just beginning.